Second. Thank you for continuing to post your names. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this program of the University of Arkansas Small Business Technology and Development Center. We're so pleased to be able to bring you these educational programs to help support your small business. Please be advised that, as I mentioned earlier, we will be recording this conversation for ASB TDC education purposes. Additionally, as a registrant and attendee of this conversation, you'll be emailed a copy of this recording and any links that are posted in the chat today. It will also be available on our website where you can access tons of great content. I'll introduce Melissa momentarily. First, I'd like to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about ASB TDC. I'm Lindsay Ramsey. I'm a specialty consultant here at the center. I deal with marketing and social media and email marketing. If you don't know about the Small Business Development Center, it is a one-stop shop for startups and existing small businesses. We are associated with the University of Arkansas and affiliated with the SBA and statewide ASB TDC, and yes, that's a mouthful, as well as a national network of more than 1,000 small business centers. Locally, we offer complimentary one-on-one consulting and programs like this one, covering the relevant topics for business owners. And if you're not already a client, we encourage you to visit us at sbtdc.uark.edu. All right, well, that's all the business stuff we have to take care of. And I want to tell you a little bit about the program that we're bringing you today. Today, we're bringing you Creating a Profitable Marketing Strategy, Part 1, actually. So this is a two-part series, and we'll be telling you more about that later. This is an interactive format, and we love it because it gives you an opportunity to talk with other community businesses and hear from them, and also as experts like Melissa on this subject. Please ask any questions that you have and work through whatever challenges and successes you and your small business may be having. We'll get to ask those questions and work through those together. It is an interactive time, so you're encouraged to ask questions. Please keep yourself on mute, which in this webinar format, you'll have to let me know if there's a question that you would like to ask, or you can post it in the chat. All right, well, I want to introduce Melissa to you. Melissa, as I mentioned, is a Southern California-based marketer, speaker, consultant, and author. She teaches small businesses how to market on a budget and helps them execute their marketing strategies, in addition to working with business organizations to train their trainers. She offers keynotes, presentations, workshops, and webinars, and her national and international speaking schedule has taken her as far as New Zealand, probably pre-COVID, and I bet she's ready to travel again. To date, she's delivered over 120 workshops and webinars to thousands of attendees. Before starting Melissa Forziat Events and Marketing, her career involved roles with the Olympic Winter Games, the Rugby World Cup, and the U.S. Olympic Committee. So we've taken a few minutes to get to know Melissa, and I'd already asked this, so if you haven't already done it, please post in the chat your name, the business you're with. If you're with ASB TDC, go ahead and post that too, so everybody on the program can see who we're talking about. All right. I think that covers all that I need to do. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Melissa, and I'm going to turn off my camera so that you guys can focus. Make sure that I'll also make sure that you post, when you post your name, post it to everyone and not just the panelists, so that everybody can see who's on the call or on the Zoom. I'm going to turn my video off so you guys can focus on Melissa. Again, if you've got any questions along the way, please post them there and we'll bring those back up with Melissa at the end. All right, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, a huge thank you to Lindsay, to Julie, Mary Beth, to everybody at the University of Arkansas SBTDC for partnering with me to put this series of presentations together. We've got quite a lot of presentations coming up in the future as well, and I'll give you some hints about what's coming up as we get closer to the end of the webinar. But I'm so excited to have a lively group on with me today to talk about creating a profitable marketing strategy, because to me, this is one of the most impactful things that you can do for your business, to develop a marketing strategy that will ultimately lead to more sales, to more referrals. And we don't often talk about this. When you look at marketing presentations and workshops that are made available to small businesses, usually what we're talking about is how to reach brand new leads for the very first time. So we're constantly chasing the shiny new lead, not realizing that lead retention and customer retention is ultimately what is going to drive sales for most businesses, because sometimes it takes a little time with a lead to build the trust, and you have to stay in front of them to do that. So we're going to focus on that today. And this, I have to warn you, this presentation will be a little more theoretical than you would normally see from me in the beginning. To me, this is kind of like peeling the layers of an onion. We're going to start theoretical and we're going to get more and more specific as we go along today. And as Lindsay said, this is part one of a two-part presentation. So basically, this is the presentation part of it. And next week, we're going to do a Q&A. And I'm going to give you an exercise that you can do in between them. So if you want to start working through the marketing strategy for your business, I will be on to answer questions live about how to apply this to your business. So we'll do as much as we can today. And then I really encourage you to work through all this so that we can make a huge impact in your business in the next week or two. So having said all that, I do want to circle back a little bit here. Lindsay gave a little bit of information about who I am, but I thought I'd share a bit more insight on that, because to me, that does impact perhaps how you view the material. So I started out in my career doing major international sport events, like Lindsay said, Olympic Winter Games, Rugby World Cup. I worked with the US Olympic Committee. So these are some of the biggest brands in the world. They're operating at a scale and a scope that is almost impossible to imagine as anyone human. But in order for them to profit, in order for them to really reach the volume of people that they need to reach, they have to be working a long time to build up a community around their brands. And they probably have a number of different target markets that they're trying to build up all of those communities simultaneously. They may spend years doing that. And then by the time an Olympic Games rolls around, now you have a waiting audience ready to buy tickets, watch on TV, volunteer, apply to be a member of the staff, sponsor. There's so many asks that an organization like that would have. And it doesn't happen overnight that they go from zero to millions and millions of people who are ready to accept whatever call to action they put out there. They spend a lot of time building it. So they have to have a plan for how to do that. And that's something that I learned from the organizations I started working with. And it's a concept that I felt was very applicable when I started my own business. So I am a micro business owner, like I'm sure many of you are as well. Melissa Forziat Events and Marketing is a small business, and I, as many of you probably do, don't have the budget of an Olympic Games. I don't have the time of all the staff of an Olympic Games or even all the human resources. So I have to be efficient with what I do. I'm a big believer in efficiency and being effective. And this is how you get there, creating a marketing strategy. And that will help you ultimately be more organized and in the process, generate more sales and referrals. So that's where this all comes from. Even though I have a big games background, I have a small business now, and this concept still very much applies. So here are a few quick housekeeping items before we dive into the material. First of all, as Lindsay mentioned, we encourage everybody to be on mute during this session, but please do feel free to jump into the chat, talk to each other, make sure your chat is set to everybody as default, or everyone, I should say. Having said that, though, even though we're asking people to be on mute, I also encourage you, if you have something happening in the background on your end that's distracting you that you can shut off, this is a really good time to do that. If that's silencing your phone or shutting off a messaging device, please go ahead and do that now, because this, even more so than some of my other presentations, really, you'll get more out of it if you're thinking about your business during this presentation and applying all this material to your business as we go. So bear that in mind and see how much you can focus in, because if you can minimize those distractions, you're going to get a ton more out of this material today. Now, in terms of the material itself, I'm sure there will be some slides that you'll probably want. So I've got this whole slide deck up on a URL, and I'm going to give that over to Lindsay at the end of this presentation so that you can get that sent out to you afterwards. There's also going to be an exercise that I give you, and I'm going to have a link to that on a couple of the slides. So as we get there, bonus points to anybody who wants to throw that in the chat for me. And then in terms of questions, first of all, there are going to be a few times that I ask you questions. And when I do that, I encourage you to respond in the chat because I'm interested to know, just get some baseline information from the group here so I can make this material more applicable to you. And then if you have questions, I have definitely saved time for questions at the end, and I'll be looking for them at the end. So I encourage you to save as many of your questions for the end as possible, because like I said, we're going to be peeling the layers of the onion with this presentation. We're going to start off more theoretical and then get more specific. So I may answer some of your questions as we go along. But if you do have a question as we go along and you want to throw that into the Q&A section or the chat, then we'll try to see if we can find those as we go so that we don't leave anybody behind. So those are a few quick things that I wanted to mention before we get into the content. And here's how we'll approach the content itself. First, we'll talk about the value of staying in touch. Basically, why are we talking about this today? Then we're going to start a little more detailed with strategizing how to stay connected. Then we're going to get more into your business. So how does your strategy work? Some tips for creating your own funnel, and basically setting you up for the work that I'd love for you to be able to do in the next week before our Q&A session in a week's time. And then lastly, we'll just circle back to why all of this is worth doing. So that's how we'll approach it today. And if all that sounds good to you, let's go ahead. Let's talk about creating a profitable marketing strategy. All right, first things first, the value of staying in touch. Why are we here today? Why are we all listening in on this presentation? Well, I want to start by throwing a question over to you, just to get a baseline that'll help set us up for the rest of this presentation. If you're on with me live right now, how often have you reached out to your audience? Let's say just during the pandemic so far. Let's take this confined period of time. Now, if you feel like there's regularity around that, you might say once, twice, never. You might say weekly, monthly. If you can put any sort of a word to the answer to this question, it'll help give us all a better sense of what's the baseline for this group. What's our starting point that we're working with? If you're not really sure, feel free to ballpark it. You don't have to research this and look back and try to get that information, but this is a great time. Just give me a quick, rough estimate, throw that into the chat so that we can get a sense of where people are as a starting point going into the rest of this presentation. And already we've got Alicia saying weekly or bi-weekly. Awesome. Teresa saying my business is a startup. I haven't started marketing yet. Great, Teresa, you're in the right place. This is a great thing for you to be thinking about as you get going. Caitlin says the same thing, also a startup. Welcome. So exciting to have people at the early stages of their business. Britannia, also a startup. Nisa is saying monthly. Stephanie, same here. I'm thinking you're also a startup. My goodness, Linda's also a startup. We have so many startups here. That's fantastic. Sarah, awesome. Not opened yet. Sarah, it turns out you're in very good company here today. Sabrina also starting up. Tisha, startup. Oh my goodness. So I will say that this is it's a little bit of a theoretical presentation. So you're going to have to think like in 3D chess format to create a strategy for yourself. But this is such a great time for everybody who's in the startup phase to be thinking about how to do marketing the smart way before they get started. Dominique, also a startup. This is just fantastic. So I'm really excited about this. For those of you who are in business, I've heard everything from weekly or bi-weekly to monthly outreach. And this is our starting point, right? And for a lot of us, we're starting from the ground floor and we're working up together. I love it. So let's talk about why I asked that question. When it comes to selling, there's actually one key rule that I want you to remember. And this is a general sales principle known as the rule of 7. It says that it takes at least 7 touches to convert a lead into a sale, or to, warm leads and build trust enough that if you were to put a call to action in front of somebody, they would perhaps be likely to accept it, to take action on it. Now, with the rule of 7, like I said, this is a general sales principle. So you will see a lot of companies actually measure their data, and they'll say, okay, if we have this many touch points and then we send a salesperson in, 13 touches later, that's the most likely time when they'll convert without wasting our resources. For some businesses like mine, you may find that different sides of your business or different ways that you market might have a different number of touches needed before somebody converts. So for example, in my business, if I'm able to have a live speaking engagement in front of somebody physically, and they need to work with a marketer, they might become a client a lot quicker than somebody who met me on social media and met me only online. It takes more time to build that trust. And I'd say the quality of touch point does matter. So the rule of 7 is a general sales principle, but the idea here is that's probably going to take more than once to reach people. Sometimes it takes a lot of times. And I even hesitate to tell you sometimes how many times it takes me. Maybe I will a little bit later. But for now, let's just bear in mind that you want to be able to continue to get in front of people, to build those relationships, to build that trust, and hopefully to build your sales in the process. Now, let's look at a few different angles on why it's important to do this. So I'm going to give you some visuals to think about. If you lost touch with somebody, it can be awfully awkward to know how to reach out again. Have you ever had that experience where it's like, this person's on my to-do list. I know I'm supposed to reach out to them. It's been a little while. I don't really know what I'm going to say. Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow rolls around. They're still on your to-do list. You're like, oh, it's a whole day later than it was yesterday. I still don't know what to say to them. But I'll do it next week. And then, next week rolls around, and eventually some of those people, maybe one day you do reach out to them. Maybe they just kind of fall off of your to-do list altogether. And I don't know if any of you have had that experience before, but it happens to the best of us. Even if you've got a plan, sometimes there's something that falls through the cracks because you just didn't know what to say. And that's so unfortunate, right? That was a warm lead. That was something that had good potential, and now it's just weird. Now it's just awkward, and it feels like a setback for your business sometimes, because it's like, I put time and effort into building a relationship to the point that it was at, and now it's cold. So we want to get out of the land of cold relationships or relationships that cool off specifically, because that's more of an action on our part. So this whole presentation is really designed to help prevent this very situation. Now, another visual that I'd like you to have is, your business is ultimately going to grow by planting seeds and nurturing those leads. You plant the seed, you water it, and eventually it blooms into something pretty, something you can eat. There's a lot of things it can bloom into, but it doesn't happen unless you give it that care that it needs. So I'm a huge believer in planting seeds and giving them time. Sometimes they take more time than others to grow into what we're hoping they're going to grow into. But this, again, thinking about your marketing strategy is allowing for all of this to happen. So if you like the idea of planting seeds and nurturing leads and not letting contacts grow cold, that's a great idea. But how do we get there? How are you going to stay connected? How do we actually make this happen for our businesses? Well, I'm going to pose a question back to you. I know that we've got a lot of startups on, and I'm guessing this is the time when you're going to be doing this action that I'm asking you here. But do you have a plan mapped out for how to stay in touch with the different segments of your audience? Right? Do you have, maybe not just an overall plan, but do you actually know, like, for the different types of people in your audience, different target markets you may have, do you have some idea of how you're going to get in touch with them, how often you're going to get in touch with them, even if you haven't launched yet? Is this something that you've worked out, or are you coming here with, starting from ground level? You don't have a plan. And I know we have some people who are already in business as well. So I'd be curious to get everybody's thoughts on this, just to see where we are as a group. Just because you haven't launched doesn't mean you haven't thought about how you'll reach out to people. So like to get a sense of where we are before we start diving into how to do all of this work. And Brianna's got a tactical idea here for social media. So yeah, that sounds like you're thinking, you've got the wheels are turning about how you're going to approach your audience or audiences, because a lot of us have more than one target market. Willie says ground level thinking about email tools. Awesome. Misa, I mainly use Facebook and Instagram to keep in touch with my customer base. Awesome. So far, I'm getting some really interesting answers. I think you're going to get a lot out of this presentation, everybody. So Caitlin says, starting at ground level and looking for advice on how to best reach target audiences. I like that. And we'll talk, we'll give some ideas with that, Caitlin, as well today. And then we're also talking about how to maintain your connection with those leads. Alicia, also using social media, working towards utilizing an email list. Okay. This is really interesting, these answers. We're going really tactical, and it's cool to see how you're all thinking. And I think this presentation is going to open up your minds a bit to the big picture. Sarah, I plan to use Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, email, radio, and community events. Okay, we got a lot of things going on there, and I'm seeing a progression with some of them, so that's cool. And Alicia, also collaborating with similar producers for wider reach. I love that. Partnership marketing and partnership anything is a good idea when you're a small business owner. Great. Thank you all for sharing these ideas. I'm filibustering here a little bit just in case anybody wants to get a couple more answers in there before I move on. But these are super interesting answers to me. A lot of times people give me like a yes or a no when I ask something like this. So I love that we're getting into details with this group. You're a great participating group. I love this. So I will keep moving through. This is just to get a baseline of where we are as a starting point, but let's circle back to the material itself. The better your plan, the better your follow-up will likely be, and the better your sales revenue is probably going to be as a result. If you have a plan, you're probably going to execute it more, which means you're going to continue to stay in front of people, which is likelier to result in more sales, more potentially referrals, more word of mouth for your business, more repeat sales from the same people. So this is the sweet spot. We want to have a plan so that we know what we're going to execute on. Now, when we're talking about what we're going to do to create a plan, there's going to be a format that we'll talk about in this session, and also, going into the Q&A as well. And it's what I would call a marketing funnel. Now, you may have heard of the term marketing funnel or sales funnel or pipeline. I'm going to use those terms interchangeably during this presentation. What I'm trying to conjure up with this term is, if this is a structure for you to organize your plan, your marketing plan, to show how you're going to maximize your customer service and your sales, how you're going to take people from hearing about your business from the first time to becoming your best customer, not just hearing about you once and walking away, but now how are you going to keep them with you and start to control the flow of information going to that person. So I tend to structure that in a visual that I would call a marketing funnel. Now, if you've heard this term before, you may find that, like when you've heard sales funnel, perhaps maybe what you're thinking of is software somebody's trying to sell you, where they have like a squeeze page and a landing page, and then they take you through some emails and then hopefully get a sale. That is a segment of the idea that I'm talking about. But what we're going to try to do here is really show the big picture of everything that you're doing for marketing that is keeping in front and basically charting the customer journey so that you can see it all at once, regardless. You may have multiple channels of marketing in your marketing funnel that you're reflecting all at the same time. So this is just going to be a visual structure that we're trying to create. Now, I know I haven't shown you what it is yet, but what does it feel like when you don't have one? Let's start there. So for some of you, you're, launching, and maybe you haven't gotten to the point where you're in execution mode and you're like feeling the overwhelm of it all. But let me tell you, when I developed this strategy for my own business, what you're seeing here is a picture of me. It was a great day. It was jury duty, actually. I was still living in Seattle at the time. Just so happened that I randomly got called for jury duty at the same 2-day period as a friend of mine. So we sat in this big room full of people, and this was many years ago. And he, at the end of 2 days, he took this picture because he thought it was screamingly funny that I was pretty much the only person in the room who hadn't moved from my chair for 2 full business days. I'm sure that I went to the bathroom at some point. I probably ate lunch in that chair. And I was just tapping away on that laptop for 2 days. And I don't know, it was really notable to him. He took this image and it made me think, what was I doing for all that time? Exactly what was I doing? I know I was working. I know I was working hard. But what was I doing for my business? How much of that was really necessary? So I thought, okay, well, how would I document what I do all day? Even just for marketing, let me document how I do what I do all day. So this, what you're seeing behind this image is my first attempt. This is what, 5.5-ish pages of me just writing down for marketing what I do, or at that point, what I did. Now, you're going to notice some things about this. This is not a plan. This is really disorganized. I came away from this thinking, what of these things is important? Which of these things are actually moving my business forward versus just being busy work? What am I doing all day still? Like I've got it written down here, but how does this help me? How do I know what's working? How do I know what to track? How do I know what I should spend more time or less time on? How do I know what I can delegate? I couldn't answer any of those questions in this format. So I started working through it and I figured, all right, how am I going to start organizing this so that I can be more efficient and hopefully more effective and hopefully drop fewer leads along the way? Like, I don't want people falling through the cracks, but I don't know where the cracks are with this 5.5 pages of Word document. So I ultimately turned it into a structure that looks like this. Now, you're not meant to be able to read it. What I want you to see is the big picture of it. There is a structure here. At the top, that's how people discover my business or become part of my community for the very first time. This would be any of those things that people are potentially doing, like social media or maybe networking events, or some of these things where you're getting in front of people for the first time. They're becoming part of your community. They're becoming aware of my brand, right? Now you're seeing that I've really charted out the milestones that I want to bring people through until they get to the bottom level, which is that's my best customers, my best partners. There were a couple other great things that can happen for like great affiliates for courses, and that's all charted at the bottom. Ideally, those people are going to be good referral sources and bring people back around to the top. So people are feeding into the funnel that way too. But what you're seeing here is I've got sort of a beginning and an end point, and I've got milestones that I've charted in those boxes in the middle. I've separated this out into tiers. The other thing that you may notice, and I know, and Sarah, yes, the font is tiny. It's not meant to be readable. This is not going to be useful to you as much because it's my business, not yours. But what I want you to see at this moment, and it's a great question because we are going to get into details a little bit later. We're still at that first layer of the onion. So I want to make sure that you understand the big picture of what we're trying to accomplish, which is we need a big picture. So one of the other things that you might notice here, and this is going to be a little hard to tell, but there are actually arrows between some of these boxes, right? So if I'm in one of those action items, if I've met somebody in social media and that's represented by one of those top layer boxes, I now know, okay, I want to get somebody to this next step right here, and then this next step over here, and then this next step over here. And I have also created some guidelines on how I'm going to do that. So over the years, I've really fleshed out what's happening in those arrows, right? If somebody doesn't respond to that first email, here's how I'm going to reach out again. Some of these things turned into email sequences and I never have to think about them again. So, this is what I hope you're seeing here is, yes, there's complexity to it. It's not a beautiful funnel shape, but it's showing you how do you not leave people behind. Wherever they're starting from, there is a next step for them if they're ready to take it. And that's something that helped organize me to support my clients better. And ultimately, I'm hoping that we can start getting you on the road to creating something like this for your own business. So this is what we're aiming for, and we'll talk more about how to do that as we keep going through. The main purpose of creating your funnel, and if you come away with absolutely nothing else from this presentation, I want you to start training your brain to ask the question, what is the next step? every time you're talking to somebody who could be a lead, like a customer for your business, who could be potentially a good collaborator, maybe it's another business owner that you want to do some partnership marketing with, you want to work with them and maybe boost each other's voice in some way, whoever it is you're talking to, it could be potential volunteers or staff members, it could be some other operational aspect of your business. The goal here is for you to always ask this question. The thing that we're talking about today, what's the next thing that will help you? What's the next thing that you would need to do? What's the next thing that I can offer you? Always think about what that next step is, because if you do that, you're a lot more likely to actually follow through with it. You won't waste time thinking about how to stay in touch. You won't need to figure out, what am I going to try to do next with this person? You're probably going to have planned out better what a realistic next step for them is, and you're much more likely to follow through on it as a result. You may even find that it's very easy for you to plant that seed for them. If you're having a conversation with somebody today and you just plant that simple seed, hey, just so you know, this thing is available to you if you need that at any point, and then you leave it there, that person may come back to you later ready to accept what you put out there without you even having to do much work around it, just because you knew that's what they needed next. So our goal here, again, what is the next step? Now, we've been theoretical long enough. Let's start talking about how your strategy actually works. Let's start by looking at what one pathway looks like, because I know I just showed you this image with a whole funnel of my own business, which is a little bit more developed, right? I've thought about this before, but especially for those of you who are in startup phase, I want you to start getting practice on thinking about what the next step would be. So you can start by asking yourself, what does one pathway look like? So let me walk you through this. Here's a slide that potentially you might want to print out by itself when we get you the slide deck, because this could be a good one-pager. It could be an exercise that you do for your business. Now, what this is doing here, we're working with this idea of the rule of 7, which is an arbitrary number for us, but we're trying to see if we can get these touch points in. So on the left side, we've got, what's that seed you want to plant, right? So let's say you've met somebody on Facebook, and what's the desired outcome from that moment to the next thing? Do you want them to sign up for your email list? Do you want them to show up at an event? Do you want them to download something that you've got available? What would be the good micro step that you can have after that, right? So seed planted from, let's say from Facebook would be, let's say signing up for your email list. Your desired outcome, okay, sign up for the email list. So what's the first time you're going to mention how to sign up for your email list, and how can you get, 7 different touch points there that'll help walk them through that? Another example for perhaps could be you've built a list of people that you want to reach out to who potentially could need your services. So, you've built that list, and now you're going to do that first pitch. How are you going to get in front of them as many times as you need to until they're ready to say yes? Can you, are there different ways that you can weave in, phone calls, emails, different types of touch points? Can you eventually get them into an in-person meeting? All of these are different things that you can do. If you get creative, you can start thinking about what's the content of that email going to be. So we're just thinking about how can you keep people with you to get that first micro step accomplished. A lot of people won't go from hearing about your business to becoming your customer all in one shot. That might be too big a jump, but maybe you can get them to make these little micro conversions that get them more and more into your community. So this is an exercise that you can start to do that may help you think about how to formulate this. Let's show an example of something like this. And I want to show you how fluid a funnel can be in the process. So let's look at, I know I've already gotten us off of a perfect straight line, but we're starting to see that you can build some complexity in. So here's an example that I call the networker. Here's version 1 of it. Let's say this business, whatever this business is, does some different types of networking. And those are ways that this business can meet new customers for the very first time. So at this level, let's keep it simple. There's 3 things that this business is doing to reach new audiences. One is active networking. Maybe they're doing virtual or in-person networking events some number of times a month. And so that's a place where they can meet people. There are referrals that could happen maybe from that group or from existing customers. And then there are podcasts that this person has been a guest on. They don't host a podcast, but they've been a guest on other people's podcasts. Those are recorded. They're out there in the universe. Anybody can listen to them and potentially discover this business. So again, that top line is the way people are hearing about this business for the very first time. Now, what would happen from there? You don't want to leave the networking event and have nothing happen. You don't want the introduction to be made and then nothing happen. You don't want somebody to listen to the podcast and then ignore, never contact you, never do anything. But what is the next thing that can be done? Let's say we've charted out, okay, the next thing is going to be an initial direct email sequence, that first series of emails before it kind of hits a natural pause. So from a networking event, you've both met each other, so either person can do that email. So this business owner could go home and say, all right, tomorrow I'm going to email this person and start getting into that next step of this relationship and do the emails. With referrals, sometimes you know that introduction has been made, sometimes you don't. So if you don't know, you're hoping that person reaches out to your business and hits that direct email phase themselves. If an introduction has been made, hey, this person, you should meet this person because you can both help each other. Great. Now, what do you do as a business owner to reach back to that person and get that next phase of the relationship, that first email interaction? Now, for the people who listened to the podcasts, this business owner has no idea who's listened to the podcast. The podcast is out there, it's recorded, and they get no data about who has listened. They're hoping that somebody who listened will contact them. And now all of this has filtered into the direct email. So ultimately, this business is hoping that all of these roads will lead to somebody becoming a multiple time a year client. So how do we get there? Well, from that natural pause in that first email conversation, you don't want to let it go there. So maybe you add a little scheduled reminder to yourself. I'm going to reach back to this contact every couple of months just to see how they're doing, just to stay in front of them. Be a reminder that comes up in their inbox that I'm still out there just in case they need me. And hopefully from there, I'm going to get them to convert to buying my services or products one time. And from there, once they bought it one time, I'll check in again and see if I can get them to buy multiple times per year. So this could be an example of a very simple workflow for the networker. Now, there's potentially a lot of detail on how you do this that's not in here. We're keeping it simple for now. But what if the business owner starts with this as their model and then they realize, oh, I'm doing all of this, but I don't seem to be getting people to buy my services. I'm meeting people, I'm emailing them, I'm touching base every couple of months, and I can't seem to get people to buy the services or products one time. What is missing here? Now, this is where you get to become a detective in your business. You've got a plan and there seems to be some sort of a gap. And now you get to decide, what is it? You do a little sleuth work and you try some experiments and see what you can insert into this plan that may make it more effective. So here we've got version 2 of the networker. Pretty much the same thing as version 1, but you're going to see I added those 3 boxes in the middle. So what if the goal here, from all those ways that somebody could meet this business for the very first time, you get into that first email sequence and reach a natural pause. But what if instead of just saying, I'm going to email them once, see how it goes, and then I'll email them every couple of months after that and see how that goes. What if the goal from the first emails is, how about we meet for coffee or meet on Zoom, right? What if that's the goal that you're trying to get people to, not to buy the services right away, to meet for coffee. I just want you meeting for coffee. It would be great if we met for coffee. There's a lot we could accomplish there. So now you sit down with this lead for coffee, you start to build a relationship. And now you think, okay, there's two new things I'm going to do. I'm going to send you a portfolio now because I've got your attention. And I'm going to see if I can get your permission to add you to my weekly newsletter. And so now I'll be sort of passively staying in touch with you in this mass way, but I'm also sending you the portfolio to build this one-to-one relationship. Now, adding those 3 steps, we go back into the original plan, touching base every couple of months, and hopefully now they're ready to actually accept the call to action when you offer them services or products one time. So this is something that you can experiment with, right? When you've got a plan and you've got it documented and you see, okay, I don't seem to be getting people to convert, to make that jump from this place to this place. What can I try in the middle that may build the relationship in a different way? It lets you start to get creative because you ultimately know what you're trying to achieve. You just need a different way to do it. So this is something that sort of charts out one line. Now your business is going to be a little more complicated than this. Your funnel is ultimately a visual documentation of every pathway at once. I don't recommend that you create all these little one lines, these single pathways to show the entire marketing strategy, because you're going to end up with a lot of inefficiency. You're going to end up with some overlap of some things that, oh, you probably, don't need to do that this many times. You just need to get somebody in their own straight line pathway. And for you, it may be more efficient to document the whole picture rather than the single picture a bunch of times. So if you can document every part of the pathway at once, you're going to find that your business is a little more complicated, right? If I were to try to break this into, single pathways, I might end up having a lot of duplication here that's not shown when I put everything into one picture. So ideally, after you've done this single pathway exercise a couple of times and you've gotten yourself into the habit of thinking, how am I going to continue to stay in front of people? What's my next step from every phase? Now I'd like you to try to jump to the bigger picture and start working on the whole picture at once. So your business is complicated, right? So let's talk through an example of a bigger picture. Now, I know as we start to get more detailed here, this can be an overwhelming thing to look at. We're recording this. You'll be able to watch it back later. You're going to be able to get those slides later. And we have a whole Q&A session where we can unpack this in detail for your business. So bear with me if you feel like this is a lot, especially for those of you who are in a pre-launch phase. But remember, the goal here is to think, what's the next step for people at every time? So let me talk you through this. That top line, that is still how people discover your business for the very first time. That bottom couple of entries there, that tier is showing what it looks like if somebody is the best customer for whatever this business is. So let's walk through this. On the left, that's the networker example that I showed you originally. It's exactly the networker example. So this business, the very first time somebody can hear about this business, they can hear about it from a networking event the business owner attended, from a referral that was made by maybe a previous customer, from a podcast that business owner had recorded. But also, there are a few other things this business does. They put ads in a local newspaper. Maybe somebody hears about the business through that. They have a storefront. So maybe somebody walks by the storefront, sees the signage, and now they're aware of the business. They're on social media, and I didn't put specific platforms here, but let's just say they're posting on social media, doing some engagement there. People can discover the business from there. And we've also got Google search, or really any online search, right? If somebody does an online search, they may come up with a listing for that business. So we don't want people to stay forever in that top line, because that's not where the money is, and that's not where the referrals really exist. You're not going to get great relationships out of that. You have to keep moving people through to the next step. So what's the next step? Well, on the left side, we've talked about the networker example before, right? From the networking or the referrals, the podcast, you're hoping to get people into the email, you're hoping to get them to meet for coffee, send them the portfolio, and then touch base every couple of months, maybe set a reminder to do that. And hopefully from there, you'll get them to buy the services or products one time, so that you can now continue to get in front of them so they can buy services multiple times per year. Okay. We've seen that part of the example before, but what's happening in the rest of the business? Well, we've also got this ad in the newspaper track. There are people who discover this business because they saw an ad in the newspaper. So what do you want them to do from there? Is there an incentive that you can give them? Is there a sign up that you can, something they can sign up for that you want them to take an action? So now they do that. And let's say, for example, that puts them on a newsletter list so that you can continue to reach them. Let's say monthly, let's say quarterly, let's say every other week, maybe weekly. And from there, you'll keep putting offers in front of them until they buy the services one time, and then maybe multiple times per year after that. Now, we've also got this other track on the right side, right? There are people who've walked past the storefront and saw the signage, they saw the business on social media, or they saw it in an online search. And from all of those things, they thought, oh, that business sounds interesting. Let me look up more about it. So they go and check out the website. Great. but they don't just go from being on the website to becoming your best customer, right? So how can you build that trust? So this business, whatever this business is, they thought, okay, I'm going to build trust by showing my authority. I'm going to have some blogs that they can browse through. I'm hoping that they'll stay on my website for a good long time, clicking around to different information that I put out there. And then maybe I want them to check out something that they actually pay for. So now they've read some blogs. They know I've got some good content. Now maybe they're going to buy a low-cost worksheet or a low-cost product of some sort, right? And then from there, the people who bought that, maybe they're willing to do a little more. Maybe I can get them into an online course. And then from there, maybe I can get those people who did an online course into a live event. So obviously this business has a lot of different stuff going on in terms of, what product or service is this? I don't know, but you can do this for any type of business. It's all about asking, how do you keep people moving through? What's the next step? What's the next micro step that you can ask them to make so that the stepping stone isn't put too far away where they're not going to take that step. It's put just close enough where they can actually see themselves doing that action. So one other thing you might notice about this is I've got a couple arrows going sideways. You can also have arrows going back up to the top. Those would be, cross sells, those would be down sells. Those would be things that keep people looping around in the part of your funnel that is most productive to them. For me, I often have people stay at that newsletter phase, sometimes for years before they're ready to work with me. In my business, there can be a very long gestation period. I just had a client this year who called me up and said, Melissa, I attended an event of yours in I think we decided it was 2015. And I'm ready to work with you now because I've been on your newsletter list. I've been getting your weekly newsletters for 6 years and I love the stuff you're putting out and I'm ready now. Oh my goodness. Had I stopped reaching out to this person 1 year in, 2 years in, 3 years in, 4 years in, 5 years in, I might not have that client. But because they continued to get those newsletters, they sort of stayed circling around in that part of the funnel until they were ready to move forward. And I was still there for them when they were ready for that moment. So for me, I knew I needed to build that into my business, which is why I've got that newsletter there. But for you, you might get people who move through it quickly or who move through it more slowly. This just helps you document what are the stages that you might want to go through so I don't lose you altogether. So having said all of that, my goal for you is that between now and next week, that you are able to start working out your own version of your own funnel for your business. So what are some tips that can help you get there? The first thing that you have to do before you can put the puzzle together, you have to have the pieces. I always think of that when I think of this exercise. So before we put everything into a pretty funnel shape, you start by figuring out what are the puzzle pieces, what are the marketing activities that are going to go into these different tiers for you. So what you're going to notice here, and bonus points to anybody, I don't know what those bonus points are going to be for, but bonus points to anybody who can put the link that's at the bottom of here. If you can type that and get that into the chat so that people can access it right away. I'm also going to get that back to the ASBTDC to send out to you afterwards, but this will be an exercise that'll be very, very helpful for you to do for your own business between now and next week for those of you who join me for the live Q&A. What we're trying to figure out here is what are the different components of your marketing plan? What are you doing at that entry level that can potentially get people's attention for the first time? So that, again, like we saw in the last example, that could be things like having a storefront. It could be doing networking events or going to events. Maybe you're at farmers markets or you've got other events where you can have a presence as a vendor. Maybe you are building a list of people and doing email outreach. Maybe you've got a directory listing somewhere. Maybe you're doing social media activity. Maybe you've got, ads that are out on, newspaper or radio. Maybe you've got guest blogs out there in the world. Maybe you've got referrals coming in. These are all some examples that I can think of how somebody could meet your business for the very first time. So think about things like that. There could be lead generation tools that you use. Everybody's business is different. So think about where your business could have a presence that could get you in front of your target markets. Where are the people that you want to meet? Where are they? And which of those places could you be in? That's what's in your entry level. So now, thank you, Alicia. And so next step, we're going to talk about what are the free offerings you can put out there. Once you've met those people, what can you do to stay in front of them? Can you give them information? And what can you, do you have leave behinds, printed collateral you can give them? Do you have blogs? Do you have a website? Do you have a newsletter? I might put that on another tier down. For me, that's like a next step. Do you have something they can sign up for on your website so that they can get more information from you and they can get onto your newsletter list? Maybe you have a really big ticket item, and this is free offerings for them is maybe going to be wining and dining. Maybe that's, costs you money, but it's free for them, but you need to really woo them because you have that kind of an offering. And it could be giving them a branded item, something that they're going to touch and feel and come back to and think of for your business. So these are all different things that you can potentially have out there. It could be that you have a free event that you ask people to check out where you can get their contact information, get them on your list and reach them again. Could be that you have direct email or phone interaction with them. So these are all some things that you could do in that free offering space. That's just staying in touch with them and really nurturing that relationship. And now we get into the stuff that has a cost. So depending on what your business is, some of these things may work better than others. Low priced offerings could be trial offers of a bigger ticket item or service. It could be a one-time product or service. It could be that you really do have something that in your pricing tiers is a lower price. Mid-priced, it could be, again, something that actually does fall in a mid-range of all your services, but it could also be that you bundle a bunch of low-priced things together. High-priced offerings, do you have a big ticket item? Do you have a big event or conference? Do you have a one-time product or service that is a larger thing? Do you have an online course? Do you want to take the one-time service and turn it into a yearly or annual or monthly package? These are all different ways that you can look at that. Not every business has all of this stuff, right? So this is about really identifying what puzzle pieces you have. So hopefully talking through this helps you get some ideas. Again, if you do this exercise afterwards, it will guide you through to start thinking through that. Again, the main focus, where do you want your leads to go next? Or to frame it differently, how can I help them next? This is coming from a place of service, right? It's not just about what can I get from you. It's about how can I be of service to you? So having said that, I just want to close, why is this worthwhile? Why, really coming back to that, this is coming from a place of service idea. I want to pose a couple quick questions to all of you. Feel free to throw your initial answer into the chat on this. How does it feel when you don't know the way forward? So if you've got a problem, if you've got something that you've been grappling with, some sort of a pain point, and you're not really sure what the solution is, you've been dealing with the problem for some amount of time, you don't really know what the resolution is or if there's a resolution for it, you've just been kind of simmering in that pain point. What does that feel like to you? So if you're on with me live, put a quick gut reaction for me in the chat. How does it feel for you when you just aren't really sure about the way forward for you as a consumer? Caitlin jumps in with frustrating and overwhelming. Alicia, frustrating. So far, we're seeing that word come up a couple times. If you've got a quick gut reaction to what that is for you, feel free to jump into the chat and let us know. But so far, we've got a couple people who say frustrating. We've got overwhelming. Those are a few quick reactions that we have initially to being in this sort of pain point space. Frustrating and stressful from Misa, lost, concerned, worried from Kaylin. These are big words that we're throwing around, right? This is how your customers could be, or your potential customers could be feeling. It does not feel good to not know the answer to your question. Sabrina says uncertain. Tom, an opportunity for improvement. So you're a glass half full kind of guy. Alicia shuts down on any progress or action. Sarah says timid. Think about these words. Other than Tom, oof. These are some not feeling great words that we've got here. And that is the land that your potential customers could be in. Now, I want to ask you the reverse of this. Let me know again in the chat. Quick reaction to it. How does it feel when somebody offers you a solution? So you've had this problem for some amount of time and somebody says, have you ever tried this thing? They're not necessarily hard selling it. They're just saying, there's this thing out there you might want to try. It could be the fix to the problem. Caitlin says relieving. Lisa says relief, motivation. Caitlin and Lisa are very synced up with their words here. I like that. You're landing on similar words each time. Yeah, so relief, motivation, board maybe looking for services, move on to someone with better practices. So you're definitely looking for, you're in this world where you're thinking more of solution oriented, helpful, making progress, exciting, helpful, also from Tom. Think about what a difference this is, right? A new path to potentially move forward through. Well, that's optimistic, Nisa, right? Like if this is the land of optimism. Somebody says, hey, there's a thing that could solve your problem, just so you know, and you say, oh, great. Maybe you buy it right then and there. Maybe you wait a little bit, but you now are empowered to know that you have a potential solution to your problem. So just keep that in mind. That's why it's good to plant these seeds with your customers. You can potentially solve their problems, and that's a good thing. So the potential outcomes that we've got here, you can put your clients at ease by offering solutions. You're coming from a place of service, you're building trust, and you're not ghosting them, you're not ignoring them and leaving them behind. Also, for your business, you're creating the opportunity for more sales and for more referrals just by nurturing people more. Plus, you're going to feel more organized in what you're delivering because you'll have a roadmap for exactly what you need to execute and when. So I want to make sure I do leave enough time for questions here. I just want to wrap by saying, start creating your marketing strategy and you will end up having a roadmap to more sales. Now, I do want to remind you that we've got a Q&A coming up next week where we'll answer in-depth questions about your business, but do feel free to put questions into the chat that may help you as we start to this exercise. Here's a reminder of what we talked about today: the value of staying in touch, strategizing how to stay connected, how your strategy works, tips for starting to create your funnel. And again, we have that link that I think Alicia was kind enough to put into the chat that goes straight to the that's the exercise you want. If you say, Melissa, I have no idea how to move forward, open the link. That is going to give you instructions on the next steps. And then we talked about why this is worthwhile. So just a reminder, next week, October 6th, same time frame, a Q&A, right? So come with your questions, come ready to work on your business. And then after that, in November, we've got a session talking all about online marketing strategy, looking at blogs, newsletters, social media, lead magnets, and your website. And then in January, we're going to look at profiting with partnership marketing. There's more to come after that. I just put the next 3 on this list so you have an idea what's coming up and you can start getting those onto your calendar. Again, here's a reminder of that exercise. We've already got the link in the chat, so go ahead and grab that. And I'm going to go ahead and take questions now. And if no questions come in, I also want to throw it back over to Lindsay.
Thanks so much, Melissa. Does anybody have a question? You can post it. Oh, I see one here in the Q&A. Teresa has asked, are there any touch point methods that you consider ineffective in general?
What a good question. I've literally never had a question like that. And, I think every business is different. So what works for your business and what works for a different business might be 2 completely different things, right? So I think be very aware of that. I will say there are some that your business may not be suited to, and that's the answer to that question. So for example, a lot of people hone in on social media. Social media takes time. It takes relationship building and nurturing. So if you're not prepared to spend that time, you're probably not going to get a lot out of social media. And there may be other things that you could do online instead that will get you further. So maybe consider something like what your website looks like, blogs. How do you get people on your list? So for the people who are going to be really able to spend time building relationships, that's a great place to be. For the people who aren't going to be able to spend time building relationships, that's probably not going to be a very productive use of your time marketing. So that answer would look different across the 2 businesses. So I guess just be aware of that. I think anywhere that people are flocking to because it's trendy also, think about what that means, because it means that platform's about to get saturated. So how are you going to use any specific marketing option, any specific marketing tool? How can you come at it from a sideways angle? How can you be there and then come in sideways and meet people in a way that's going to surprise them so that you're using a saturated marketing channel well? So I know that was a bit of a general answer, and I do look forward to diving into that with you in detail when you look through your business and come back next week with like a specific question. But hopefully that gives you an idea.
There's another question from Caitlin in the chat asking for startups. Do you have any recommendations on how far out a business should start trying to connect with and build relationships with customers before they have products and services available for sale? This is actually one that we get a lot here at the center because ASBTDC does help businesses get started and get going. So I'd love to hear your feedback on this one.
This is a great question. And we've obviously got a lot of people in startup and pre-launch phase here. So depending on what your product or service is, some products and services exist in the land of pre-sales. Think about books. An author wants to sell a book. They want those books pre-sold before it hits the market so you can be a bestseller from the first day. Crowdfunding campaigns leverage the idea that people can pre-order a product so that you see that there's demand and interest. It is never too early to start telling people, unless there's an intellectual property thing that you need to think about. I guess that would be the caveat. If there's a legal issue around you sharing information, start teasing people, start building your list. If you're pre-launch, get people excited about the solution you're going to bring to the market so that they're ready for you when you're ready to put it out there. So I say never too early, as long as you're ready to put a professional face on for your business. If you've got something to show them, a website or something that'll look professional, get out there, start building those relationships, start building your list.
Okay. We've got one more question and then we'll close it. So I'm going to go ahead, and if you need to hop off because it's your lunchtime and you've got to go ahead and do that. Make sure that you go back to our website and register for part 2, where it's going to be all about questions and interactive so that you can learn how to apply these to your business. So Alicia's got a question. I'm going to go ahead and give that. But again, thank you for attending. And if you need to hop off, the recording will be available on our website and it'll also be sent to you. So Alicia said, I have several types of potential customers, for example, individuals, schools, retailers. Do you recommend creating separate funnels for each type of customer, or create a web in the same funnel for strategies for each type?
That's a really good question. And I would try to put it all in one visual space for you so you can see if and when there is overlap. So for example, if you're reaching, if you've got different messages happening to individuals, schools, and retailers, but they're somehow all ending up on the same newsletter list, that's actually going to be a point when they merge, right? But if you have everything happening separately, put it in one place, but so that so that you can see all the actions you have to take, even if their pipelines are separate. But the thing that I like about being able to put everything onto a sort of one palette for yourself is that you're able to see, are there any places where I can merge my workflow so that I'm not duplicating these efforts? So hopefully that gives you some idea, but start figuring out the puzzle pieces. And as you go to lay it out, you may very well start to see that there are places where you can see that combination. And for those of you and so these are great questions. Hopefully you're already seeing the value of having other people ask questions to give you ideas for your business. That's what we want to achieve next week as well. So come in with those, do that exercise, start figuring out your puzzle pieces, and then let's get down to business next week and start talking through your questions. With everybody talking together, you're going to end up getting so many more ideas for your business. So I hope this helped everybody. Thank you all so much for joining in today.
Well, and thank you, Melissa, for leading us through this, and everyone for being here. Again, as a registrant and attendee, you're going to get a copy of this conversation as well as the links. And remember that you can register for the part 2 on our website, and then you can also find a full listing of our workshops at sbtdc.uark.edu. And also, so many of you mentioned that you were a startup. If you're not already working with a consultant at ASBTDC across the state, please log on and register and sign up. We can help you with every phase of your startup. And those of you that are post-launch, we would be happy to have you sign up as a client and assist you too. We look forward to seeing everybody for part 2. Have a great day.